purpose of this video is to talk about how statistical data can be misused using a post that was recently shared on a social media page exclusively for Christian families. I won't reveal the name of the page, that isn't the point. The post says, "This is what happens when man plays God and tried to outdo nature. Look at when the deaths in India started rising so quickly, same time as when the mass vaccinations started. Hold firm to God. Nothing happens outside of his will. He is a shield to those who trust him and not have pharma as their God." It also shares a picture of a graph from Our World in Data, which, by the way, is a great place to get data. Their words, along with the graph, paint a picture, share a narrative that COVID vaccines are dangerous. The graph can seem a bit jarring if you don't realize that one line is daily numbers per million and the other is cumulative per 100. What does the graph tell us? As of mid-April, between 1.5 and 2 out of every 100 people were vaccinated in India. This line is cumulative. It is compared to a line graph to show you the new deaths each day, not cumulative. And it shows how many people have died each day per 1 million people. They are vastly different metrics and were pretty obviously chosen because their curves match. However, we can see that sometime after vaccinations began, the number of new deaths per day did start to increase as well. The person who shared this implied that people were dying because of the increase in vaccination. This is fairly easy to debunk. Let's start with the intended implication. Mass vaccinations started in India, and the number of people who died of COVID increased with those vaccinations, meaning the vaccinations caused the deaths. If this were accurate, then you would expect to see this in other countries as well. The easiest way to fact check this is to compare India with Israel. This chart shows the number of doses administered per 100 people in India and Israel. In Israel, upwards of 120 doses of the vaccine were administered per 100 people, more shots than people, due to the use of a two-dose vaccine. As of this recording, about 58% of the population is fully vaccinated, while about 62% have had at least one dose of the vaccine. Look at the numbers for India. It looks like they are running about 10 shots per 100 people. They have fully vaccinated between 2 and 3% of the population, which, if I do the math correctly, means maybe another 4 or 5% have had one shot. Let's apply some critical thinking to their implication. If the vaccines are causing an increase in death from COVID, or really even just an increase in death in general, it would be glaringly obvious in Israel. And if more people are dying from COVID, then more people would also be infected. This chart shows the number of cases per million. Israel has gotten down to less than 10 cases a day per million people. That is pretty amazing. You can see that, like many other countries, they did not control community transmission well over the winter months, but as the numbers of people fully vaccinated increased, infections reduced dramatically. If you look at India, you can see that, like much of Asia, their people followed public health guidelines in such a way that their numbers remained low throughout the winter. Their leadership declared that they had beaten COVID and was careless in how they opened up, allowing large religious festivals and political rallies with no public health guidelines. At the same time, India started to run low on vaccines and only vaccinated a small percentage of their population. I won't completely unpack the ethical and logical problems with this post, not with any nuance anyway, but I want to point out a few things that highlight some inconsistencies. First, in order to accept that the vaccination is an attempt to play God and outdo nature, then we would necessarily be required to reject all medical intervention that didn't directly come from nature without any adaptations made by man. Second, if you say that nothing happens outside of God's will, logically that means that the development of the vaccines were part of God's will. Third, if you imply that taking the vaccine is to make pharma your God, that would logically mean taking anything from pharma, like cancer treatment, insulin, pain medication, other vaccines. is rooted in idolatry. And then God won't be our shield because we earn that by trusting Him. This is not biblical at all. Welp, I hope that this will help you look at data a little more clearly and fact check it if something seems off. And remember, just because someone agrees with your worldview doesn't mean that they are motivated by what is good and true. Fact check, fact check, fact check.